Okay. Aloha, everyone, and welcome to our annual business meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. I am Kathy Hoshar, the current ACSA president. I am an associate professor and the director of the University of Hawaii Community Design Center at UH Manoa. I want to recognize that this is a difficult time. We have global, national, regional, and disciplinary shifts impacting our institutions, our organization, and our relationships with each other. And in a minute, I'll introduce our facilitator, Josh Moulton from Strategy Matters. But before I do, I want to begin with a public and a personal apology. I typically represent the collective voice of our board or our members and rarely speak in my own voice. And here I want to speak personally with all of you. This annual business meeting today is shaped by the ACSA board's decision to halt the JAE issue of Palestine. That was a collective decision. And I'm deeply sorry for actions that were hurtful in these difficult times. The few people who know me in this call know that I would never intentionally harm or harass or endanger any of my colleagues. And I'm so saddened by the space that we're in now. I was born and raised and live in a place that values kindness and generosity and aloha, and my hope is that we can together restore this in some way in our community. And I'll speak more on this later. Since 2017, the organization's focus has moved away from how to advance diversity to how to advance equity and justice. And in this moment, all of this is being scrutinized and cut. This moment is an affront to all we do, from reversing issues of equity and climate action to denying the basis of science. Higher education, who we are as an association and a body of faculty who believe in the power to transform lives, is fundamentally under attack. And ACSA is not insulated from this meeting. And in this meeting, we'll touch on what the association is facing moving forward. We hope that there are ways for our organization with JAE and with our members to work together to be collaborative and strategic and to be able to support the integrity of principled work without risking the organization. I'm going to introduce Josh Moulton and Liz O'Connor from Strategy Matters, who will be assisting us tonight with facilitation. Josh?
Sure, great. Thanks so much, Kathy, and good evening to everybody. I think we've had the opportunity to meet at least some of you. I think this is a much bigger group than we've had the pleasure of meeting with so far. We are working with ACSA right now on the strategic plan, which is going to be the goals for that plan will be coming into focus in the coming weeks. And since we're partnered with ACSA in that capacity, we agreed to join you all tonight to help with facilitation and some moderation of the discussion this evening as well. I just want to take a minute and introduce myself. My name is Josh. I'm joined by my colleague, Liz, who is here as well. Liz, can you come off mute and just say hi briefly?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Glad to see you all. And yeah, I'm the other facilitator working with you on your strategic plan. Good to be here.
Thanks, Liz. So I think just really briefly, I wanted to introduce just a couple ideas that I think will help us to have a productive discussion. So we've got a pretty full agenda with some things to cover, and we're going to have some time at the end, hopefully 20 to 30 minutes for some discussion related to the journal topic that Kathy mentioned. I did want to share something with you all. We have what we've been calling participant agreements. These are sort of ground rules that folks can use and oftentimes find helpful for navigating challenging conversations. And you can open this, I put it in the chat if you like. I'm sure that a lot of you have things like this that you use with your own students. So this is just there as a helpful guide if you find it helpful. A couple things that I did just want to flag for folks before we dive into the main agenda. ACSA for proceedings like this does use Robert's rules to kind of guide the structure of the conversation. So as we get into discussion, those are things that we should kind of keep in mind for the way that we introduce concepts and so on. I also did just want to acknowledge that we have this time at the end for discussion, and I think we want to make sure that the speakers that are lined up to cover the topics you see on the agenda in front of you have time to cover their respective topics, and that we save a lot of the discussion for the time at the end that we've set aside for it. And we're also, as a closing, I'll let you know now that we'll ask if we don't have enough time for discussion tonight if folks are interested in another opportunity to do that. So that's going to be an option for folks as well. If there's a general sense that we have more discussing to do as a group, we will find a way to do that with you. Three other real quick things, and I'll give a reminder of this when we get to the discussion component, but just a couple, I think, ground rules to help folks kind of stay in the right mindset to have a productive conversation. I think the first one, for us as facilitators, we think there's a really important distinction between safety and comfort, right? So comfort is oftentimes something in a difficult conversation that's going to be challenged and pushed on a little bit, and you may kind of find yourself feeling uncomfortable when there are opinions expressed that are very different from your own. That is different from a challenge to your safety. And it's my job and Liz's job to make sure that we kind of step in if we see discussion crossing the line from what looks like genuine, authentic engagement around issues where there's deep disagreement to something that looks more like challenges to personal safety, which would look like personal attacks of various sorts. So if we can keep this to, when we get the discussions component, focused on, ideas and concerns rather than on, anything interpersonal, that will help us, I think, have a productive conversation. I think also this is an opportunity for folks to speak up, especially if they have a point of view that's not a majority point of view. We want to make space for all of those types of perspectives to enter the conversation when the time comes for it. Just a final thing, this is a really large group. I think we have nearly 300 people here together on the Zoom, so we're going to have to be really careful with time. We're going to ask when we get to the speaking portion of our session for folks to keep their share to 2 minutes or under. If you hit your 2 minutes, we'll politely interrupt and remind you on the time. And then, if we have to, we've got our mute buttons and things like that. But I think just the polite interruption usually does the trick, and I'll trust that we can operate with that today as well. So I think by way of kind of framing for what our role, that is Josh and Liz from Strategy Matters, I think that's it for now, and we'll join you again for for some moderation and facilitation when the opportunity arises for us to have some discussion. But I will turn the agenda back over to Kathy now. Unless, Liz, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to add, or Mike or Kathy that you wanted to add to that framing?
No.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Good.
Thank you. We appreciate your support. So to begin, I would like to recognize our ACSA board. We have Jose Gamez, June Williamson, Moselle, Shelby Doyle, Peter Robinson, Marcelo Lopez Donardi, Delia Endum, Vivian Lee, Josh Foster, Hilberto Lozada Baez, Heather McMahon, and Michael Monty. And I also want to introduce our newly elected board members, Second Vice President Luis Rico Gutierrez, and our at-large directors, Jose Ibarra and Mara Marcu. We also have Student Director Trevin Thompson, next year's Vice President of the AIAS and a student at the University of Washington. So excited to welcome them. And I also want to highlight the exceptional ACSA staff. Mike Monty, Eric Wayne Ellis, Daniel Dent, Kendall Nicholson, Michelle Sturges, Julie McKenzie, Hanifa Jones, Abel Chanyalu, and Enwin Hernandez. We all know that they are anchors for all of us, and they have had heavy, heavy loads to shoulder these past few years. I also hope we can take a moment to show our appreciation for Eric Ellis for recently celebrating 20 years with ACSA. So congratulations, Eric. We appreciate you so much. Okay, to make this an official meeting, we need to record who is here representing their school as a faculty counselor or as a proxy. On screen is a list of schools that registered to attend this event so that we can confirm who is actually present. We ask that you click the link pinned to the Zoom chat and complete an online form to identify yourself, the school that you're representing, and whether you are the faculty counselor or serving as a proxy representative. Either role is acceptable to make this an official business meeting, but we ask that only one person serve as the official representative. So if you are not a faculty counselor or proxy, please do not complete this form. To have a quorum for business, we need 1/3 of full member schools represented, which is 49 out of 147 full members. We'll continue to monitor the chat to make sure every school who is present is counted in our attendance. And after the treasurer's report, we will confirm whether we have a quorum. So thanks for putting your attendance into the chat. President's report. A lot of our work this year responded to disciplinary shifts related to accreditation and licensure. And Mike Monty will be summarizing some of this in his membership report later. But I do want to take a few moments to thank the people who supported the work of ACSA over this year and recognize the tremendous volunteers that we have that have supported this organization. So this past year, ACSA held the Fall Administrators Conference, the Longview, co-hosted by the University of Colorado, Denver. And I want to thank Mark Swackhammer and his team for graciously hosting this event. And in January, the ACSA AIA Intersections Research Conference focused on new housing paradigms. And that was hosted by UT Austin. Very big thank you to UT Austin Dean Heather Wifter and Professors Martin Hattach and Elizabeth Mueller, as well as John J. Clark from Realm Architecture and Development and Florida Atlantic University. So big thank you to them. As part of ACSA's current strategic plan, the board created a number of funding opportunities for faculty working on social equity and climate action. In this academic year, ACSA is supporting 5 faculty fellows working on a range of issues related to equity and justice in architecture that Kendall will talk more about later. ACSA is currently funding annual travel grants to faculty who face obstacles to inclusion in architectural education. The grants support attendance at the ACSA Administrators Conference or annual meeting. To date, 16 people have received the grants and another 8 will receive grants in over this year. For the last 3 years, ACSA's Journal of Architectural Education has managed the JAE Fellows Program, which provides $5,000 grants to 4 scholars each year. The program addresses the need for support and representation of Black, Native, Indigenous peoples, and other people of color in architectural discourse, particularly those who are not currently affiliated or full-time with a university. These grants and programs will continue to serve those who they were always intended to serve, those exhibiting financial need and who have demonstrated a commitment to the profession, and we remain committed to supporting these opportunities. The work of the association is also supported by our program committees. I'm going to share out the work of our research and scholarship committee, and then Edson Cabalfin will share the work of the leadership committee, and Jory Erdman will share the work of the education committee. All right, we're all the way up. Okay, research and scholarship. I'm going to briefly present, and I want to thank Ian Kane and Jose Ibarra for chairing the committee, and I want to recognize all of their committee members for their efforts. This is truly all of their work. The committee has been working to support the Academy for Public Scholarship, this is next slide, on the built environment, which focuses on externalizing faculty work. So next slide, there's a cohort of 12 faculty members shown here who are focusing on elevating and disseminating their work on climate action to a public audience. The cohort participated in training sessions led by the USC Annenberg School of Communications, followed by writing group meetings. And there is currently a call out for a second academy cohort, which will be focused on housing equity. And I know the committee recently worked really hard to submit a Graham grant to support a third academy on public health. So we'll see how that goes. The committee also focused on developing resources to help secure funding, help faculty secure funding for research. A survey was sent out to research administrators, next slide, to ask how ACSA can help to expand access to funding. And this led to hosting an online webinar, Navigating Funded Research and Creative Work in Schools of Architecture. And all of this is available on our website. A very big thank you to the speakers shown here, Corey, Andrew, Sadef, Andrew, Kathy, who offered their strategies and tactics and their different university contexts for extramural funding. Next up, we have Edson Cabalfin talking about the leadership committee. Edson, can we make sure he's unmuted?
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Edson Cabalfin. I am the chair of the leadership committee for 2024-25. And I'm also the associate dean for faculty affairs at Tulane University School of Architecture. Next slide, please. The general charge for the Leadership Committee, as a reminder, is about supporting the strategic development of architecture programs as part of the ACSA's strategic plan. And in the past couple of years, the Leadership Committee have been involved in different issues related to faculty concerns and issues as related to equity. Next slide, please. For example, in 2022-23, the committee, for example, has produced a report focusing on fellowships in architectural education. And this is available through the ACSA website. Next slide, please. And then in the following year, the committee has also produced a guide framework for expanding K-12 engagement as a way to look at the relationship between K-12 programs and our architecture schools. Next slide, please. For 2024-2025, I'm also serving again as the chair for this committee. And the focus of this year is about faculty mental health and well-being, and looking at various resources and support that could be afforded to our faculty member schools. Next slide, please. And this year's committee is supported and composed of various members of ACSA school faculty, including Kiwana, Lee, Ciara, Danielle, Cesar, Vivian, Gilberto, Shelby, who have been working tirelessly and in the last couple of months on this topic. Next slide, please. And so the work of the Leadership Committee acknowledges the challenges that faculty in architecture programs across the country faces regarding mental health issues. Next slide, please. And so the committee has been looking at how might we address faculty mental health and well-being in architecture schools, specifically through the lens of the role of ACSA in addressing these issues. Next slide, please. And so in the last couple of months, the committee has been working on first looking at a couple of resources and literature that talks about faculty mental health and well-being. And then in the administrators conference last November, the committee sponsored and hosted a session focusing on this issue. And then in this upcoming annual meeting in New Orleans, we are also hosting another session that is really about developing a toolkit and a resource guide for architecture programs. And so we are looking forward to having you also join us in a workshop in this coming March in developing this toolkit and resource guide, and with the general goal of having this guide and toolkit available for all of the ACSA member schools. So that's just a couple of work that we have been doing in the last 3 years, and we are looking forward to having much more conversation also about these important issues in the future. Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks so much, Edson. Next, we have Jory Erdman to present on the Education Committee.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to everyone who's attending today. As noted, I am the chair of the Education Committee this year, and I am also a professor and associate director of the School of Art Design and Art History at James Madison University. I want to first acknowledge and recognize all of my wonderful committee members, Ulrike, Thomas, Delia, Joshua, Bailey, June, and Kendall as our staff person. Maybe compared to the other committees, we're small but mighty, and I think we're doing some great work this year. So our charge this year, see if we can go to the next slide, has really been about following up on the 3 years of previous work by the Education Committee that focused on community colleges and how to best serve our community college colleagues. And what we've done is really look at what's happening in four-year schools now. And Kendall did some initial research for us last year or maybe a couple years ago. And what we found is if we expand the pool of potential students that ACSA serves by virtue of serving their faculty, we have a much larger enrollment of students. It could be up to 54,000 students. So we're looking at a lot a lot more students than we might have previously recognized if we were only taking into account NAB accredited programs. So if we could go to the next slide. So that's been our charge this year, is trying to figure out which schools those are, build relationships with different schools and bringing them into the fold, and thinking about how ACSA can best serve all the members of the architectural education community. So at the annual conference in March in New Orleans, we will be having a session where we're thinking about redefining a common ground for architectural education, looking at the ways that architecture education is not only a path to licensure, includes a path to licensure, but also serves students who go on to do other things with their lives and just generally serves the public good, perhaps. So we are looking forward to a collaborative conversation about this. And if people are looking for a kind of workshop where they can participate and think about how we define architectural education, we would definitely welcome you to come to our session. And the next slide. And in our future, we're looking towards the future and future collaborations as we wrap up our work for this year. Again, we've been doing research on all the schools that have other kinds of architecture programs, not just professional architectural programs. So one of the relationships that we've been building is with the Architectural Studies Affiliate Group that's part of the Society of Architectural Historians. And we are talking to them about cross-pollination of our research efforts, and again, developing a collective understanding of the needs of different kinds of programs of architecture and the teaching that happens in there. We're also talking with NCARB about a second community college convening. The first one was held in it was 2 years ago. And now we're talking about helping sponsor another one that would be a community college convening with NCARB to continue the conversations that were started back at the first one and really build those relationships between community colleges and four-year universities and facilitating that transfer portal. Okay, that's the end of our report. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dory. So up next, we have the Vice President's report by Jose Gamas. Can we make sure he's unmuted?
Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks, Kathy. Mine will be a little bit brief. We're looking at strategic planning and thank you all to those of you who have been a part of the process thus far, either through online or in-person meetings or surveys. Tonight, we're talking about some of the overlapping pressures that are shaping the landscape that ACSA is navigating now as we know it. Again, it coincides with our 3-year strategic planning process, which happens to be led by Liz and Josh from Strategy Matters, who are also helping us tonight with our conversations. We've had a member survey back in October. Again, thank you all to those of you who participated. We've held workshops at the Administrators Conference focused on the long view of architectural education. In November, on the 19th, we held a town hall for all member school faculty to discuss the challenges and opportunities they see ahead in architectural education. In February, the 27th, we held a caucus to revisit these challenges and opportunities, given the new and changing political environment. All of these meetings focused on the shifting landscape ahead of us that faces not only architectural education, but perhaps our allied collaborators across campuses and the implications that it has specifically for ACSA. We've been now moving towards a conversation around field building, looking at what this means for architectural education, especially for the next 4 years. A key part of a field building process is being able to manage conflict in a healthy way, and the moment that we are in is testing us all, as you might guess. I'll just wrap up by saying we're looking ahead again across the changing landscape. The strategic planning process will help us define our role in a field of educators, ranging from the scope of schools that Jory just mentioned, from 2-year to 4-year to the 6-year world of graduate programs, so to speak. And given the wide range of changes regarding federal funding, state and federal policies, accreditation, regulation, deregulation possibly on the horizon, this process, we hope, will help us plan for the impacts on our overall membership and the ways that we can be supportive of our peer institutions. So the hope is that we can position the organization to be nimble enough to navigate a changing landscape while we also serve as an effective asset for you all joining us tonight. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jose. Next, we have Peter Robinson with the Treasurer's Report.
Good evening, everyone.
There you go.
I'm Peter Robinson, faculty in the Department of Architecture at Cornell. It's my pleasure to present our Secretary Treasurer's Report. The ACA Board of Directors reviews the organization's financial statements at each of our 3 meetings. The board's Finance Committee also receives more detailed financial information on the organization's budget, investments, and financial management. Each year, the organization has an audit by an independent certified public accountant. The organization is currently in the middle of its audit of the fiscal year ending August 31, 2024. Should the audit find anything out of the ordinary with ACSA's finances, or any substantial changes to the outcomes that I'm presenting, which is unlikely, it will be my obligation to share this with the membership. So let's start looking at our finances. Right. Okay, here we are. In this slide, you see the ACSA statement of financial position, our balance sheet, with comparative numbers from last year. In the 2023-2024 year, ACSA's net assets increased by $112,406. I will say more about this in detail in an upcoming slide. Our assets and liabilities do not show any troubling or unpredicted changes over the previous year. Total assets grew at about 8%. Our liabilities are higher than fiscal year 2023 because we recognized nearly $170,000 in deferred revenue due to our crediting forward dues from fiscal year 2023 that were not passed through to now. Now we turn to the FY 23-24 summary of revenue and expenses. As I mentioned, the organization recorded a total net surplus of $112,406. The organization posted an operating loss on revenue and expenses, but offset that with gains in the value of our investments. Additionally, the year-end numbers also include a number of planned one-time expenses. ACSA has been fortunate to have reserves built up from net surpluses gained over the last decade and more. In fiscal year 21 to 22, as the organization embarked on its strategic planning process, the board of directors agreed that it would be good to reinvest our surpluses back into the work we do with our members. We therefore are now in the 3rd year of a 3-year plan to invest in our strategic priorities. The categories for these strategic expenses are shown in the box at the right. The organization had a net surplus of $112,406 with all strategic plans accounted for, so we did not have to dip into our savings. Move on to the last slide. This chart shows a projected level of our net asset accounts, our reserves, as of August 31, 2024. We maintain 6 months of operating expenses in our operating reserve. We maintain a running balance in our furniture, equipment, and technology fund to allow us to invest in infrastructure as needed. And in 2020, the Board of Directors created the Strategic Initiatives Fund as a means to implement positive change in accordance with the organization's strategic plan. With the organization and its members facing a number of financial challenges, the Finance Committee will track our revenue and expenses carefully. We have savings to withstand certain levels of financial difficulty, but the organization will also adjust its spending in response to changes in revenue. This is the end of my report. I'm now going to switch hats to my secretary role and look to the staff to tell me if we have enough schools present to constitute a quorum for official business.
Peter, we have a quorum.
Right, thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Then we'll move on to Mike Monty with a membership report.
Good evening, members. Thank you, Kathy. I'm reporting to you about 4 topics that are shown on the slide here. Above all, I want you to understand why ACSA is taking a deep look at ourselves as a membership organization. The right metaphor is hard to determine. Maybe the ground we're standing on is shifting. Maybe the ice floes are breaking up. I spared you the polar bear slide. But whatever's happening, we are not and cannot be the same organization that we were before the pandemic. We're a global organization. You may not know that members of the Association of Architecture Schools of Australasia are affiliate members, in addition to the full members and affiliate members in the United States, Canada, and the Middle East, South America, Puerto Rico, and many other places. This slide shows two charts about program members and what faculty, and on the left, you can see the distribution of member schools by category, how many full members and affiliate members and so on. On the right is a chart showing the number of faculty teaching at programs accredited by NAAB. This is because this is the best source of data that we have about faculty broken out by program type. Note that there are more part-time faculty teaching in these programs than full-time faculty. From who we are to what we do, here's a list. You've seen Kathy talk about many of these already, or the program committee chairs, and more people are on the agenda following me, so I'm not going to dwell over what these details are. I want to transition to my next slide by noting what our advocacy work is. These are the alliance organizations, and as Kathy said at the top of the meeting, a lot of our work this year has responded to changes in accreditation and licensure, so I want to address that quickly. ACSA is the primary education organization that advocates for architectural education. We are the collective voice on accreditation and licensure for faculty and schools. For more than 2 years, ACSA has been engaging at a discussion with our members and with AIA, NCARB, AIAS, and NOMA about the funding of the National Architectural Accrediting Board. I'm not going to rehash this long path. The current status of these discussions is that NAB announced that they would no longer collect funding for accreditation through ACSA and our members' dues. Beginning in 2025, they will send direct invoices to schools for fees. These are candidate schools, accredited schools, and schools seeking eligibility. The pain of this impact is exacerbated by the fact that AIA and NCARB currently will not underwrite the cost of accreditation, as they did through 2023. From 2006 to 2023, the schools, AIA, and NCARB each contributed 33% to NAB's accreditation budget. You likely know the work that we've done to attempt to continue this kind of relationship, governed by a multi-party funding agreement. And from ACSA's perspective, we would do this even if this means that NAB collects fees directly from schools. But without AIA and NCARB's contributions, about $840,000 in costs are being devolved onto the accredited and candidate member schools. We are currently trying to work with AIA and NCARB to establish a mediation process with NAB to discuss this. You might remember that the ACSA full member schools approved a resolution calling on NAB to return to a multi-party funding agreement through a mediation process. NAB communicated in November that they were open to mediation under certain terms. Since this letter arrived, ACSA has been in communication with our alliance partners, particularly AIA and NCARB, to find a way to agree to mediation. We cannot say more about this as discussions continue. We hope to be able to have a discussion across the NAB stakeholders that will result in some amount of underwriting of the cost for accreditation by the major professional organizations. Next on the shifting landscape is the NCARB competency standard and their Pathways to Practice initiative. And again, I'll be brief. I hope that you've seen a lot of our webinars, and there's information on the ACSA website about it. In November at the Administrators Conference, and in January in a webinar that we hosted with NCARB staff presented their new framework for qualifying for licensure, Again, we won't go into details, but it pretends to change drastically the ways in which students from all levels of higher education move into the profession and seek licensure. ACSA's position is that this is an opportunity that we must take seriously and not merely a threat that we need to avoid. NCARB spent numerous years developing the competency standards, and they will spend the next few years figuring out how to implement it. Architecture schools need to have a voice in this process, and we believe that ACSA needs to be the forum for our voices to be heard. So how can ACSA provide these programs and services on behalf of our members? Here's a chart showing the breakdown of our $2.5 million revenue budget in revenue outcomes in 2023-24. 55% of our funds come from dues. We have revenue that supports our conferences, but our conferences struggle to pay for themselves, frankly. After staff time and overhead are counted. We have sponsored programs that serve faculty and students, and our publications revenue comes from advertising, our Propel video library, which is sponsored by NCARB, and from revenue from Taylor and Francis for the journals. But dues are still more than half of the budget. What do dues support? Journals, to start, because our revenue does not offset the expense to produce the journals and to deliver them to members electronically and in print. Research activities that are directed by Dr. Kendall Nicholson, our annual awards program, the Study Architecture website, which is a lead generator for member schools of architecture, and other public outreach efforts that we do to help attract students to our member schools. And finally, our volunteer committees, task forces, and board of directors, like the 3 that you heard from in the president's report. We are concerned that the landscape facing our member schools, with cuts to higher education, increases in accreditations costs for professional programs, not to mention the potential impact of the ACSA's decision about the journal on members and how they interpret it, we are concerned. I'm now going to pivot to the last part now and connect back to the things that Jose and Jory in particular were talking about. You heard from Jose about our strategic planning process and the need to rethink from a broad perspective what architectural education is. What are its boundaries? What is allowed, what is determined to be in, what is not in, and whether we can transform a collective sense of our field. For more than 100 years, ACSA has been an organization focused on professional degree programs. Our governance structure puts accredited schools in the United States and Canada, and then lately other countries, as the decision makers and the primary focus for a lot of our board discussion and our programs. Since before the pandemic, though, our various efforts at assessing our organization have pointed us toward thinking about a broader ecosystem of schools, spanning from 2-year programs to doctoral programs. This slide slightly reframes how we understand the number of students in ACSA member schools. The data largely matches what Jory presented earlier. The chart on the left shows trends in enrollment for students in accredited degree programs, which are BArch, MArch, and DArch. The chart on the right widens the context to show that, in the US at least, there are approximately 54,000 students. The next chart begins to reframe how we think about the number of architecture programs are out there. It helps to show an expanded frame of reference and how it can, it should lead us to think about what our perspective on architectural education is. This is 2020 data. What is worth noting is that ACSA's full member schools are shown in the middle as the professional programs. They are a rather small part of a wider set of programs spanning 2-year community colleges up through graduate programs. So where do we go from here? The answer lies in the strategic planning process and our member engagement. The next phase of our discussions will be about how we serve our members, but in the long run, we also need to talk about dues and our governance structure and what that should look like. Should community colleges, 4-year non-professional schools have the same access to serve on the board, access to our awards program, and generally the same consideration as professional programs. Should ACSA become a flatter organization in terms of how it's governed, in other words? What changes do we need to make to retain members, especially the full members that are paying on a program basis over $8,000 a year for dues? You're going to see more in upcoming presentations, the worst conditions that are facing higher education as well. The Longview Administrators Conference we had in the fall really brought these things together for our members, and we want to socialize this out with the faculty as well. So we hope that you'll make the connection about how ACSA's business model is changing, and that we need to connect changes to architectural education, higher education, and architectural design and design practice to what the organization can become in the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mike. Okay, next on. Other business, status of DEI in higher education. So about 2 weeks ago, ACSA gathered 11 organizations, including ACSA, AIA, AIAS, AICAD, ARCC, CCCAP, CELA, IDEC, NAB, NOMA, SAH, to begin to communicate across our networks and to discuss our shared concerns about the new federal orders. Today, we have a legal presentation by our lawyer, Dorothy Dang, who has been tracking DEI laws and orders to shed some legal light on latest developments. And we'll continue to work with her as we monitor the changes in higher ed and nonprofit laws as well, to continue to do our work in support of ACSA's mission. Dorothy, if you're on, if we could have her unmuted as well.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Sure. Thank you, everyone. My name is Dorothy Dang. I am ACSA's legal counsel with my partner, Jeff Altman. So I'm happy to be here and participate, and thank you for very wonderful programming. So I want to briefly introduce myself, especially my experience with this DEI-related issues. And I have been, and I work with many associations and nonprofit. That is my core practice. So I work with all different sorts of nonprofits and associations, and many of them are in the higher education space, like many of the members here. So I have been monitoring and very focused on DEI-related issues since June of 2023, when the Supreme Court ruled on the race plus affirmative action in the context of college admissions, the holding that it's unconstitutional, and in the case of Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with that case. And since June of 2023, so we are almost 2 years, there's been a flurry of legal actions. There's private lawsuit litigation. On top of that, there's been, again, I'm sure this group is very familiar with it, it's the various anti-DEI statute in some states that specifically target public universities. So again, I think this is a community where everybody is very much aware of the attack on DEI initiative, especially in the context of affirmative action type programming that is focused on race, that is race conscious affirmative action type DEI program. And those states would include Florida and Utah. But what I wanted to convey is that my clients, many of them, are truly champions of DEI, and that includes ACSA. So my role as legal counsel is I must inform clients of the legal risk, but also provide guidance to support my clients who are mission-based organizations, just like ACSA, to continue to stay true to their core value, stay true to their mission, stay true to their purpose, and continue to do what they want to do as the reason of that they exist as an organization. But I cannot not inform my clients of the legal risks surrounding them. So that brings us to today's topic. I thought it'd be helpful to at least provide an overview of what's going on. And you would see that it is updated as of today because of the ever-changing environment we're in and the multiple lawsuits. I think right now we're almost at 100, even though it's only been 40 some days. There's a lot of pushback with respect to the various executive orders. It is truly challenging to keep on top of things, but I have a pretty, not a narrow lane, but I'm very focused on the DE&I executive orders. So everything started from January 20 and January 21st. There are 2 executive orders issued. The first one is more specific to the federal government. The second one is broadly applicable to even the private sector. You will note on this presentation slide, I've included specifically in the red colors. Those are the provisions that are related to private sector. That would include ACSA. However, the reason why I put them in red font is because at this very moment, there is a preliminary injunction in place. And that lawsuit is actually filed by the professional association. It's led by the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education. That was just filed. Again, you can see the dates speaks for themselves. Everything is happening very quickly. It's only a matter of a few weeks. They filed a lawsuit because they have standing. These are the DEI officers who used to have that job title in university. And a lot of them lost their jobs and terminated. So they have harm and they brought lawsuits. And currently it's a win at this moment because the judge in Maryland deemed that all of these provisions in red are unconstitutionally vague and likely to infringe on free speech. The administration already filed an appeal, again, 3 days later, and also filed a motion to stay, meaning that the government can still continue to prosecute so-called illegal DE&I, but the judge said no. So as of this moment, as of March 3rd, every night I check the court docket. It's like every day there's a surprise for me and I find out what the surprise is because you never know. But at this moment, there is a preliminary injunction order in place pertaining to the 3 problematic parts of the executive order that is being challenged, but it does threaten investigation for so-called illegal DE&I programming. I also want to point out what's the current controlling document, which is the government issued guidances. So that is the second to the last bullet point. There's a DOJ memo. There's an OPM memo, more specifically to the federal workforce, but nonetheless still gives a bit of a guidance to the private sector. The third one and the fourth one, I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with. One is the Department of Education Dear Colleague letter that was issued on Valentine's Day. And then there's a FAQ, again, that was just publicized last Friday, late on last Friday. So again, catching up on the weekend, right? It's an FAQ regarding racial preferences. It's really an FAQ to the Dear Colleague letter. So these are the government issue guidance, again, currently in place. That is where we are going to ground the risk assessment. Next slide. So when we talk about risk assessment, again, that's what I mentioned on the prior slide. There are some documents that's been issued that gives the public an idea of what the government considers to be illegal DE&I programming. So, and this is freshly updated. According to the FAQ issued by the Department of Education, especially for institutions that are considered Title VI, meaning you receive federal funding, and really it's this group, right? This is the community that you are directly impacted by the Department of Education Title VI type of guidance. Is any competitive process for benefit it's really an extension of the college admission process to all sorts of programming. So what I've been helping clients is to identify what are the red light and green light. The red light and the green light, most of them have a legal basis. The legal basis meaning the government already took a position. Again, this is being challenged right now, but nonetheless, we don't really know. But the government's position with respect to what the government thinks is red light and what is green light. So what's the red light? So red light is really, again, an extension of the Students for Fair Admission case. So it's not just right now, it's no longer just restricted to admission. It's really all sorts of pretty much any determination, anything that has a review process, an application process. So if you have an eligibility requirement that excludes participation based on race, that is going to be a red flag. Many more common practices that are also a spin-off are racial balancing or having some diversity target or diversity reserve seat. Anything that smells like affirmative action based on race in the eyes of the government is considered red flag. That being said, there are a few activities that the government's also deemed as green light, such as collecting demographic data to support your benchmarking and internal analysis of where the association may need resources. That is okay as long as it's not discriminatory. Then there's also observance of historical observances, celebration of culture, heritage, and specific areas of the world. That's also okay. And also accessibility for disability-related accommodation. Those are clearly spelled out as not considered illegal discrimination. So I want to sum up, and of course, I should have said my disclaimer that this is really for information purpose, and your organization, of course, where the institution that you go to, and of course, as me as legal counsel to the association, it's really a very case by case and analysis. So it still depends on, what the program is about and whether or not there needs to be modification or no modification, right? But my general advice to my clients who, again, really believe in, being inclusive, being welcoming, and promoting their mission is to stay focused on your mission. Think about why are we here, and stay true to your mission, but be aware of the legal risks going on. And at the end of the day, sometimes with some modification, you can just march forward to continue to do what you do, because ultimately the organization needs to consider the risks around them, but nonetheless stay true to their core mission. So that's my presentation.
Thanks so much, Dorothy. Next, we have Kendall Nicholson.
Hello, everybody. Kendall Nicholson. I work for the ACSA as the Senior Director of Research, Equity, and Education. And I'd like to share just a small portion of the research and equity efforts we've made in the past few months. Next slide. I'll start with the annual budget and enrollment data. For the past 14 years, we've gathered data on changes in program budgets and enrollment. For the first time in the history of the ACSA B&E survey, more than half of participating programs reported an increase to overall budgets. As compared to the previous year, total budgets across architecture programs showed a significant trend upward in the percentage of schools reporting an increase. Unfortunately, federal funding for most programs is currently under attack, and I'm concerned that without action, the healthy budgets of 2024 may not be sustained over the next couple of years. Next slide. In regards to enrollment, the pre-professional programs reported the largest gains. The majority of pre-professional programs reported an increase in applications, approximately 71%, and enrollment. Recent years of ACSA research indicates that part of this stable increase in applications and enrollment can be attributed to students who identify as Black, Indigenous, or other racialized people groups, which has also consistently reported a majority of schools showing increases in applications and enrollment over the past 4 years. And we know this too is also under attack, as Dorothy so eloquently stated. Next slide. On the topic of faculty hiring, the current trends in faculty dynamics for this year's report shows overall stability for full-time and part-time faculty, which is good. The most notable finding for faculty hiring, however, is the increase in full-time faculty teaching load. Contextual research for faculty recruiting shows that the landscape of higher education is under constant pressure to evolve, and a wave of faculty retirements alongside new technologies is impacting all disciplines. Next slide. I'm also pleased to share that I have the honor of supporting the 2024-25 recipients of the Faculty Fellowship to Advance Equity in Architecture, which include Rena Abuganam of the University of British Columbia, whose research engages terms of encampment, using a series of collective conversations to explore how Palestinians create spaces of learning amid protests and suffering. Rashad Dorsey of Clemson University, whose work focuses on developing architectural strategies to address the existential threats faced by the Gullah Geechee communities of South Carolina, particularly due to climate change and gentrification. Suzanne Litieri of Cornell University, whose research surrounding pathway programs is working to cultivate an online repository of early education enrichment programs specific to architecture. Sierra O'Leary of the University of Detroit Mercy, whose project is developing collective ways to generate standards of care to do no harm in community-engaged teaching. And Linda Zhang of the University of Waterloo, who, in partnership with the Toronto Chinatown Land Trust, is holding community learning tours to focus on land-based stewardship practices for community benefit. Probably one of the favorite parts of my job here. Next slide. Lastly, I'd like to note our most recent addition to the Where Are My People research series. This past fall, we published Where Are My People? Queer in Architecture. In collaboration with Emergent Ground for Design Education, this two-part series chronicles both societal and discipline-specific metrics to highlight the experiences of LGBTQIA+ designers, architects, and educators. Next slide. The series focuses on both the lack of representation of queer and non-binary people in architecture and design, as well as the lived experiences and perspectives of people as it relates to architecture. By asking questions about the intersections between race, gender, and sexuality, survey participants were able to bring light to the counter-normative ways in which they work. Next slide. The second part of the series, Beyond Binaries, entangles architecture and queer theory to make plain the spaces and places of contest that illuminate access to power. If you haven't yet read these pieces, I would encourage everyone on the call to do so. They can be found on the ACSA website, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Kendall. Next up, we have Elise Newman. Elise, you have 5 minutes for TAD. Thank you.
Are we good?
Yes.
And you can hear me. Great. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's nice to talk to everyone. I'm going to do a quick, I'll try and keep to 5 minutes. Just a quick update on the state of the state for TAD. Quick reminder of our current editorial board members. In the last 2 years, we had gone up from 12 to now 15 members. We think this is a great size for us. A reminder, we are a working board, meaning that everybody that you see here participates in the editorial process and has various roles. Each issue has a different issue editor. They come from the editorial board. It also includes associate editors, which change depending on the editorial team per issue. Our design editor, who is currently David Newton, but is soon to be Lisa Moffett. That role actually changes about every 2 volumes or so. And then the executive editor, myself, also changes, but at a slower pace. So we have a system for managing this process. We're now published in volumes 8 and half of the first volume of 9. We're working on, at any given point, 3 issues, 1 volume, and then an issue that is about to start, usually from sort of an overlapping volume. It's hard to describe. You have to see the cycle. But at any given moment, we're working on 3 issues. So we recently published Tectonic, Circularity, Climate, and 8.2, which is coding. But we are also working on Generative, which is 9.1, Innovation, and Interconnected. You will have seen the call for Interconnected come out. It's the most recent one. And I'll talk about in a minute some of the things that we're doing in terms of increasing our communications. One, we've got increased number of posts to social media. We've added Reels to Facebook. Thank you, ACSA, and particularly Hanifa, for working with us and our communications editor, that's Theodora Varduli, to get a lot of this going. We've added webinars to our category. We're seeking more development opportunities. And we had our first online panel discussion with authors for coding, hence my background today, just to underscore the fact we're very excited about this particular event. You'll be seeing snippets of this showing up from now time to time in your social media. It's part of us being able to increase our impact and outreach into other, not only our TAD community, but all of our communities, the professional disciplines, and even beyond. We did have TAD Awards for 2024-25, in which we recognize now 2 articles rather than 1 per volume, but 2 articles per volume. These will be celebrated at the ACSA conference. These are the previous sort of statistics for our journal metrics, about 29,000 annual downloads or views. We're now up to 39 annual downloads or views in the last reporting. It's done by quartiles or quarters. We're up in the last 2 quarters. We've also increased our speed to acceptance, our average days for acceptance to online publication. In some ways, this has all simply been us making some changes to some of our own internal guidelines in terms of how we're putting papers into a pipeline in order to forward them to the next issue. That has improved some of our timelines. And then we have an 11% acceptance rate now. Part of that is due to the fact that we have increased the number of submissions across the board. Our citation impact, we're very excited. It's the first ever impact factor that's been announced for the journal. It's the construction and building category. It's 0.5, doesn't seem very high, but it actually is quite hard to even get an impact factor. Taylor and Francis recently sent me a congratulatory email that I haven't even had a chance to share yet with the board for this. Our citation factor, which is a different site score, which is different, is at 1.3, was at 1.2 last year. It's actually gone down a little bit, but this has to do with the number of articles. We've doubled the number of articles that we're now publishing. So, and that is calculated as a percentage of the number of articles versus the number of citations. The publisher assumes that this will stay steady. To give you an idea of where those citations are happening, it's all over a number of our allied journals, right, across the board. We're very excited about that. We are seeing something, so we've increased the number. As you can see, that blue line is the number of peer review, help if I spell it correctly, peer review articles across the board. We've almost doubled. If you haven't noticed, the issues have gotten thicker. So they're really good now as a kind of solid brick to be used in various ways as well as to be read. So that is a significant, that's been a big push. It takes a lot of work to get that many articles out for each issue. What we have noticed is a trend that the top most downloaded articles in the past 12 months, 9 of those were published in open access. This is going to be an ongoing discussion and probably an emerging discussion in the publishing world, and particularly going to impact our authors and our readers ultimately in terms of access. We're in the thick of that, working with Taylor and Francis and also ACSA on that. So our article downloads increased by 30% during Q4 2023 to Q1 that should be 2024 to Q1 2025. To give you a sense, we are actually having a quite broad impact. In part, this is due, I think, to several things changes we made in the last couple of years, in which we now have at least 2 members of the EB who are in those allied universities across the world. So a member in Spain and a member in Sweden. And that has sort of increased the spread of the reach of the journal. You can see that reviewers come from all over, but we're also getting more and more submissions. We were quite happy this year to get multiple submissions, for instance, from Latin America, which we had not had before. I think in part that was also due to the conference being in Monterrey, which was actually, so these things can work in tandem. Just to give you a sense of our citation metrics, as I said, it was at 1.4, it's now at 1.3, it'll probably hold steady at 1.3. Of course, our goal is always to increase that. This is a standard publishing metric used to evaluate the impact that you're having across the board. We do have the publisher pointed out something to us that was quite important. We have 2 policy mentions. These actually are specific kinds of citations when you're mentioned in a policy journal that actually signify an even greater impact. So that was also very exciting for us. Our alt metrics are slowly increasing. This again has been a kind of full court press on our part to increase the shares, reshares, tweet right, really trying to get an active social media presence. As I said, our TAD panel was one of those efforts, and we hope to increase these again as we move forward. This gives you a sense of the articles that were well received. The journal contents, just a quick recap for you of where we are. We've doubled the number of PR articles. We've doubled the number of manuscripts in development. This is manuscripts that are in a kind of pipeline to be considered in the next issue. Outreach and promotion, our Facebook, right? We've also a continued part of our mission is author education about the importance of promoting their work. I think this is also impacting our alt metrics in social media. Our ACSA special conference, this special work session for authors, we will do that again this year. We have worked very closely with the ACSA, our communications editor, our EB team, the issue editor for each issue to improve journal promotion. Obviously, our impact factor, we've added webinars now and videos. So we feel that this has been a good move. We've also moved from Twitter to Blue Sky. So we are getting social impact on Blue Sky as well. So we think that has been a positive move. We're still looking to develop our advisory board. That will be out soon. Operations, we've actually working with the publisher to understand some AI ChatGPT guidelines. Turns out this was actually a quite sticky wicket because the publisher has a strict policy of no AI or AI imagery. Of course, a lot of the research that faculty are doing at the moment actually engages with AI and AI imagery in particular in our discipline. So this is an ongoing discussion with the publisher to understand how we can calibrate this so that we can in fact publish images that are specifically research images related to our research and scholarship. We do have the 3 new board members. We will have an another search soon. We will have board members rotating off of the board this summer, so keep an eye out for those calls. We will have new author guidelines uploaded to the web soon, and we're having a review of all of our internal operations. And this is in part in discussion with Taylor and Francis, our publisher. So operations, we're revising the editorial roles to reflect current structure of the journal, those guidelines that we're working, the guidelines, author guidelines, our ChatGPT guidelines. We're going to develop collections on the Taylor and Francis website. These will be curated issues made up of previous articles. We will increase the number of open access articles. As I indicated before, that's a critical element moving forward, get the advisory role going, and then work with Taylor and Francis on that AI policy in order to reflect their policies and ours. The other low-hanging fruit is we also have to have an archive for all of the previous issues. We're now up to year 6, almost year 7, and we have to make sure that we have captured all of the previous work. We have it, we just need to store it now. So a quick shout out to Michael Monty, obviously Danielle Dent, who we work very closely with, Julia McKenzie, the Newman's member of the team, Hanifa Jones, for us, who we've been working quite closely with on all of our social promotions, and of course, Michelle and Eric and the rest of the team in the ACSA leadership. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Elise.
You're
So,
welcome.
I'm sorry, I know we got off to a late start. I'm going to get through this, and we are going to stay long enough to have a discussion. I'm sorry about the time, especially for everybody on the East Coast. It's actually afternoon here. I would like to now talk about the ACSA Board of Directors' decision to halt the call for papers for the fall 2025 issue titled Palestine, and our decision to end the services contract that we had with McLean Clutter, who kindly agreed to fill in as interim editor following the resignation of Nora Wendell. Again, these were difficult actions, and we take all of your reactions seriously, and I want to acknowledge the robust and critical scholarship that JAE supports through all of the work of the JAE editorial board. Let me now take you quickly through a timeline that tracks the decision-making process with clear connections to the policies that govern JAE. And I note that the editorial board members published a similar timeline, which this is aligned with. We would start this timeline in February 2024, when Nora Wendell shared a draft of the Palestine call for papers with Mike Monty. She noted the ACSA's oversight role and asked if this would be a concern, and Mike responded that it would be something to bring up to the board. The editorial board met in March, and according to their account, approved the call for papers. ACSA didn't hear about that call until August 15th, when Nora sent the call for papers to the staff who report to Mike. This call was brought to my attention for the board's awareness, and this is what forced us to look at the relationship between JAE and ACSA. According to our articles of incorporation, ACSA owns the journal and is legally responsible for what is published under its name. The organization has an obligation to exercise oversight over any of its programs, and that includes journals. But how ACSA exercises that role is important, particularly with our academic journals. Typically, the ACSA board or staff do not review content or calls for papers in advance. However, a line of communication between the executive editor and the publisher, in this case ACSA, is typical. But what are the limits? These are not defined in policy. There is a contractual relationship between the executive editor and ACSA, and the board acted with this understanding of that relationship. On August 23rd, Mike Monty and I met with the outgoing interim executive editors to discuss the Palestine call for papers, and they suggested we meet with the theme editor as well. Another meeting occurred on August 28th with theme issue editors and members of the editorial board, and we were asked to send our questions in advance, which included questions that had already been shared. And we did, I see a chat in the post. We also included outreach to members to gather other perspectives on the call that helped our board to have a balanced and broad conversation. On September 9th, the editorial board sent a letter to the ACSA Board of Directors Among the comments was that the ACSA board compromised its stated ethics and commitment to inclusivity and exhibited overreach. The ACSA board met on September 10th, having received and considered the letter. The board decided not to take any action on the call for papers in recognition of JAE's editorial independence. During the fall, the ACSA and JAE fielded questions and concerns from members about the language of the call from architectural educators. The ACSA board discussed the JAE issue at its fall meeting in November, voicing their desire to engage with the JAE editorial board and to attempt to repair our relationship. The ACSA board charged the president and executive director to set up a meeting with the issue's editorial team, the executive editor and the associate editor for design. And the editor's timeline notes these attempts, which I will return to in a minute. I want to first say that in January 2025, weeks before the submission deadline and around the time of the US presidential inauguration, ACSA and JAE began receiving emails condemning the call for papers. Over 1,360 emails were received by ACSA board members and twice as many were reportedly sent to JAE. Most were not from architectural educators, and most of them that we looked at copied a US House of Representatives email address that was set up to report acts of anti-Semitism. In the weeks following the inauguration, the executive orders about DEI and anti-Semitism were issued. We did try to schedule a meeting between ACSA and JAE, having talked briefly with McLean about scope and purpose. He suggested a smaller group approach. We were unable to find a time that initially worked for most of our executive committee and the issue editors, and we tried a second time, and while the executive editor and the design editor responded, the theme editors did not, so we were not able to have that meeting. What we learned later through what has been published was that the editorial team communicated to the executive editor their unwillingness to actually meet. The editors had no interest in discussing this with us, and we were not able to have that point of connection. The issue of safety was raised to us in September by Taylor and Francis editor, who publishes more than 2,700 journals a year. Then on January 27th, McLean asked whether there was a precedent for JAE editorial board members to take on an on leave status, either nominally or in actuality. The request from the journal's own editor acknowledging the registered and potential future threats about how to protect JAE members from outside harm, whether legal or physical, forced us to return to our conversation about safety. The ACSA Executive Committee discussed the request and declined to allow the editors to be shown as on leave while continuing to work on the issue. The committee felt it set a precedent for misrepresenting the status of our boards for JAE, TAD, and the ACSA. The committee also discussed exposures related to people beyond the editorial board involved in all of our programs and services. At the same time, a faculty member at an ACSA school notified us to let us know that a communication about the call and its violation with state law was sent to their university president, and that was with their legal counsel. This prompted us to also solicit our legal counsel, and we asked our lawyer whether the risks to the journal and the organization had changed with the new executive orders. So our lawyer provided us with a quick overview of the legal issues and increased risks related to the journal issue. And I'll provide a quick overview of what he shared with us. On January 29th, President Trump issued the executive order to combat anti-Semitism, which confirmed the adoption of the so-called working definition of anti-Semitism with contemporary examples created by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. The IHRA definition has been adopted in one form or another by 35 states as of August 2024. Although rarely enforced in the past, it is also available for state authorities who may now be inclined to follow the federal lead. He offered his legal opinion that the call for papers would not be defensible against the IHRA definition and contemporary examples adopted in these states. Universities that were sued by students and umbrella groups are subject to earlier investigations by the U.S. Department of Education have so far so far have been settled rather than fought. This includes Harvard, NYU, University of Washington, the University of California, Johns Hopkins, Rutgers, and the University of Cincinnati. With a new executive order, implementation has been swift, with the appointment of a special Department of Justice interagency task force reportedly launching investigations at 10 universities: Columbia, George Washington, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, NYU, Northwestern, UCLA, UCB, University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Minnesota and Southern California. Also, a separate Health and Human Services task force reportedly is investigating 4 top medical schools. He confirmed that the JAE and ACSA leadership and the ACSA staff were at risk from personal and professional attacks, and that university members whose lifeline to federal and possibly state funding could be cut off after complaints, that they would be supporting ACSA as an organization in violation of state law. Such complaints have already been filed with at least one state and probably others, and mentioned by one other state. He asked if we thought that our members, university administrators, and legal counsel would be willing to put their federal and state funding at risk and come to ACSA's defense over this issue. The executive committee met to assess the legal review and to discuss the perceived sort of impasse with the JAE issue editors. After our unsuccessful second attempt to meet, the executive committee voted to call a board meeting at the earliest possible time to widen the discussion. The board met on February 21st, discussed this legal counsel and the implications for risk and legal action and investigation against the organization and its volunteers and staff. The full board voted to halt the call and charged the board leadership to meet with McLean to present the legal review and ask him to continue his duties as executive editor and agree to work with the ACSA board to halt the call and replace the 2025 issue. ACSA is open to different approaches to the issue that could have been considered, including some of the concerns that were raised. In that February 25th meeting, McLean said he would not agree to do this and would not resign his position. And we understand where he was coming from. We left that meeting agreeing that McLean would communicate first with the JAE editorial board before the ACSA board of directors. And on February 26th, less than 24 hours later, a journalist from the Architects newspaper contacted us for a statement about halting the call. And I'm sure that's how many of you found out about this. Follow-up was made to McLean to reiterate the takeaways from our February 25th meeting, which confirmed that he was not willing to fulfill his service in cooperation with the ACSA board. On February 28th, the ACSA sent notice to McLean that his service contract as the JAE editor was ended. We know that letter was published, and the letter was drafted by our lawyer, which cited the service contract for reference, but not as a list of accusations. We want to recognize McLean's service to the journal and understand, I want to note, we understand his decision to not work with the board. The board, however, felt like we were at an organizational impasse. On Monday, March 3rd, Ozair Saluji, the JAE's associate editor for design, sent a 3-page letter with a list of demands and a 24-hour deadline for a response. Again, this letter has been made public by JAE's editorial board members. Our response was this: Dear Ozair, we are not able to ascend the full ACSA board for discussion or vote in this timeframe, but we would be open to meeting with the JAE editorial board to review your letter and discuss paths forward. I'm also willing to apologize for my individual actions or communications that inflicted harm, and I can do so publicly and authentically. I deeply regret where we are. Kathy. This didn't meet their demands, and the call for the conference boycott was sent out. I'm saddened by the actions to boycott ACSA and to hurt the entire organization, but I understand that these actions mirror the hurt that JAE felt our organization inflicted on them and others, though that was never our purpose. And I hope that we can stop this cycle. The ACSA board is open to meeting, facilitation, finding ways to support the editors and authors in their work with some level of communication and recognition of the risks to the broader organization. We fully acknowledge that JAE has been a venue for rigorous scholarship around challenging contemporary issues. We fully acknowledge that the legal landscape for speech and scholarly inquiry is dangerously compromised. We fully understand the reaction and protest to halting the call and are seeking ways to navigate this complex situation. The ACSA's board decision was made by the 12 people tasked with fiduciary responsibility for the organization, made with great difficulty and regret in response to real and proximate risks. A fiduciary responsibility means that if JAE were to proceed with their journal, each ACSA board member could be individually sued for their support as well. In this legal and political environment, ACSA, like all of our institutions, needs to preserve its core values without compromising the work, the integrity, but also the viability of the entire organization. This takes collaboration across our boards, our journals, and our program committees. Hold on. The publication of one journal has the ability to endanger other programs, members, and staff, but we do want to push back. We understand what we've heard. We understand and hear what the JAE editorial board is saying. We all have the same values, but we need to be able to work together to be able to take on risk. JAE responded again at about 12 noon Eastern Standard Time today with a new deadline to respond to their explicit and previously stated demands by Thursday tomorrow at 4 p.m. Again, ACSA is willing to respond and work with the JAE editorial board with new sensitivity and care to mutually find a path forward, and we will be responding to that, to their emails. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Liz and Josh to help facilitate our discussion.
Josh, could I jump in for 2 seconds? I just want to say thank you to Kathy. This has been a really trying time. I know you've done your best. I can hear the authenticity in your voice on behalf of at least myself, but I think I speak for several folks in the room. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I know this is tough.
Yeah, thank you to all of you who have been speaking, and also there's a lot going on in the chat. I just want to say we're going to try to facilitate a conversation. There are a lot of people here. A lot of you want to say things in response, and we want to hear it. We're going to ask everyone to keep comments to a short time, as Josh mentioned, to 2 minutes apiece. And just to set it off, I hope in the right direction. We are, as your strategic planning partners, working with you on a strategic plan to position the association to be a big tent, a place where a lot of different opinions and diverse opinions can be heard and navigated and rigorously investigated and not shut down or shut out. That's really hard in a Zoom, in a contentious issue with 300 people on the screen. It won't all happen tonight. So we're going to try to make some space for that here, and in the strategic planning process, continue to try to build that as part of our hope that ACSA can be some wind in the sails of becoming a stronger field. This field is full of divisions, and this issue is only actually one of many that you're navigating. And they range from subject matter, territory, uses of technology, professional pathways, and all sorts of other things related to values and operationalizing them. So again, not asking that ACSA walk away from values, but rather learn as a group, this means all of you really, to operationalize those values in service to creating that space for such a conversation. So we want to have some of that conversation tonight and more of it in the following weeks and months. And so with that, I think Josh has been keeping track of who is raising hands. And Josh, I'll help you by jumping in after folks have had a 2-minute time.
Yeah, so I actually don't see any hands up now, but I think now would be the time to, to raise your virtual hand if you'd like to speak, and I'll try and keep track of folks and build a queue if there's multiple people that would like to speak. Now would be a good time to do that.
Perhaps if we don't have anyone, oh wait, we do have someone who wants to speak. Sorry.
Hi,
Alexander.
thanks. I have a question. I'm one of the JAE board members, and I'm not speaking for everybody. We don't have like a plan of, who's going to say what, but I do have a question that I don't think was dealt with at all, Kathy, in your timeline, which is why would you not have told the entire JAE board of your decision to cancel the issue before you went public? There's, I think, two issues happening here, like two problems here. And this one, I think, is really undermining the work and making it feel really, really evident that ACSA doesn't understand the work that goes into an issue and the work from its volunteer boards, all of its contributors, all of the people that come on to volunteer their time as theme editors. And you totally undercut all of that work by not reaching out to us to have that conversation beforehand, when actually you had told our executive editor that you would reach out to us. Instead, you went public to the faculty counselors. And that adds this level of misunderstanding and undercutting the work of people that volunteer their time to make the ACSA and make the JAE the JAE, on top of the infringement on our rights to academic freedom, infringement on our rights to freedom of speech. And so I think this is another issue that is in the comportment of the ACSA, and why you're kind of treating our board in this way, and why you're undercutting all of the labor that we all put in. I think that's one of the things that we've seen as people have responded to this action, is lots of people volunteer their time to make ACSA what it is, to make TAD what it is, to make JAE what it is. Why are you actively undercutting that and not treating us like we have a stake within this?
Kathy, we'll defer to you if you want to do otherwise, but my inclination is to make space for people to raise questions and concerns. We should be cataloging the questions for you to reply to after this meeting. Again, deferring to you if you prefer to answer directly, since it was posed directly to you. Oh, and it says you can't unmute. How are you gonna do that? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Zana, you bring up good points, the order of operations, the process, everything that you all experienced in what was a rushed set of correspondences, things that were meant to be sent at the same time, but were staggered. And I apologize. I'm not disagreeing with your recollection or account of what happened. Our understanding was McLean was speaking to you, and then he confirmed that, and then we were going to put everything out. I take that. I'm sorry.
Zana may not be able to unmute to respond, but let me see if others want to jump in. I don't see any other hands. Oh, let's see. Andres?
Hi.
Sorry, get that right? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I just want to kind of maybe add to the perspective. I really understand Kathy's position, and none of us would like to be in that position, and it takes courage to do this. I think things that are not mentioned here, in addition, from my experience working on journals, is that a relationship to COPE, Committee on Publication Ethics. I think the call and the process did not meet a lot of things. So it could be going down the line for the scrutiny on this aspect, where the publishers probably also is very concerned. In addition to this, even retraction of the issue. And specifically, issues are that you need to have balanced call, and this has to be represented through the board, editorial board, issue editorial board, which may not contribute to the balanced discussion. In addition to this, the peer review has to provide balance. JAE currently has peer review done by the board, editorial board, and if I might quick look at the both issue editors and editorial board publications, does not support an objective and rigorous scientific review of the papers. That's my personal opinion, but I think this would be down the line, could have been challenged based on a COPE. And I think it's very important to consider this part. I wish was happening earlier, the parts, but I think I fully understand Kathy's position. Thank you.
Thank you. Under 2 minutes as well. Anyone else? of course, we believe that many of you have things that you want to say, and this may not be the forum to say them. But of course, as your strategic planning partners and as people trying to help advise the association going forward on how to align some decision making with strategy, we'd love to hear from everyone. So I'd like it, as you can email after the meeting or jump in right now. And it looks like let's go to Catherine and then BZ.
Hi there, I'm unmuted.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a question, and that is, it's such a strange matter in that this is an important publication. This is an important topic. Beyond the work involved, the embarrassment of sort of caving in advance to this type of ugly pressure, whatever the mandate of this organization and this journal, is infuriating and humiliating. But looking forward, my question is, how can we speak to the future and to the future of submitting to JAE, into the future pressures that will come in the next decade, into the future mandates about what can and cannot be spoken and can and cannot be studied? How do we establish now some level of trust between this dues-paying membership and ACSA and JAE to know how we set guidelines, how communication occurs in an organization that is sponsored by its membership, as we've seen tonight?
No, I don't know if I should respond to that, but I think that's a collective response that you need, right? It's not up to me or our board to determine what that is. It's I think a group discussion that needs to assess and evaluate and examine what that means now.
Who's the group?
I don't know. What do you think? We're open. We're not coming with any premeditated idea of how this works moving forward. I promise.
Okay. I don't know where to take that from there. I mean, I hope that doesn't, I don't know what that means for this particular edition, but that maybe means that the structure of how this exchange has gone over the last year, a deep flaw was in that there were not structures in place that guarded against this happening. And I'd really like to know why or how anyone would contribute or support or pay dues, for that matter, if there isn't more clarity around this, because it's not going to get better, right, in the next however many years. And we need to have a better groundwork, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a couple more people who want to make comments. It's almost 9. I don't want to assume people can stay later. So I want to go to BZ, then Ursula, and then Andrew. And then and Jose, you can be the last one, and you can take us out. Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bees. I was in the inaugural cohort of the JAE Fellows, so this has been in the past, a very supportive and nourishing space for me. And I want to just amplify that some of what's happening in the chat, is sharing that there clearly is not alignment in terms of understanding of how things played out. So, there will need to be more kind of looking at those timelines and reconciling exactly what happened. I also want to acknowledge how much irreparable harm has been done directly to the people all involved, including you, Kathy, including you, Mike. I understand that many people on this call and beyond have been targeted and threatened. And that is precisely why this should have been an opportunity for all of us to come together and push back, instead of some of us punching down on those more vulnerable. So it's really disappointing. It really disheartens me personally and so many others. And if you're seeing a lot of emotion from a broad range of people, that's why, is because it's us next. So we all feel it collectively, and it sounds like if we believe you, that you feel it too. So this is the opportunity to turn it around, to reinstate, to stand our ground more firmly together and push back against the fascism that is threatening all of us. Because if we can't get it right on one issue of one journal, then we certainly cannot make it through the rest of this administration, this term. And I'll just cede my time there for the rest of the comments from everyone else.
Thank you.
Ursula, you
I
got-
hear you.
great.
Hi, thank you. It's good to see so many people here tonight. I just wanted to kind of clarify Andre's insinuation that because of the board's general political leanings, somehow we would not be scholars enough to recognize and blind peer review scholarship of merit. That's deeply insulting. That's the problem. That's what they want us to be doing. To say that because we're liberals or the wokeness that is under attack, somehow we're incapable of being the serious scholars we are. You could read our CVs and know who we are. The other thing is that the essays are actually are required by the ACSA and Taylor and Francis to have at least 2 outside reviewers and sometimes 3 outside reviewers. So, and they're all double blinded. And so it's not just us deciding what's being published, but it's a rigorous peer review process. The reason we're on this board is that we've applied and been elected because we have track records of not just being people with opinions, but being serious people with serious scholarship. So that's deeply offensive and dangerous. So thanks.
No, thanks, Ursula. And that was never any intent of ours to disrespect any of you. I don't know many of you, but I do know some and have great affection and respect for those people. Thank you.
Andrew, come on in.
Hi, I'm an assistant faculty member in Philadelphia at Thomas Jefferson University. I'm in this because I have students who I love teaching, and this conference is important for the professional development and promotion for assistant faculty, so that we can continue to teach. I love teaching. We all love teaching. That's why we're here. I am incredibly conflicted on how to move forward with repair. The word, the action for construction, and the conference based on where we're at. I'm really concerned. I really do not know what to do. I know this is a difficult conversation. I have students who have family members who have died on both sides of the wall, and they figured out how to be in a room and talk to each other on my campus. And I really want to figure out, I don't know how to move forward, but I must move forward for my students, and I need to move forward professionally. But I also need to do it in a way that I can come back to my students and they can accept me into the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Jose, you'll be last because we're a little bit over time even, and then you can send it back to Kathy and Mike.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, everyone who's expressed interest. What I take to heart is that we all care deeply, and that gives us a place to start from, to Andrew's point about repair. We do have ideas about a working group that can help us focus on these kinds of issues. There are real liabilities that we all face right now, the 2 boards, the staff, that we do have to be careful of, and we have, at least on the side of the ACSA board, for example, a fiduciary obligation, if not at the very minimum, to make sure that this organization can survive going forward, and that is in all of our collective interest. So finding a path forward is important. So I actually am thankful that people are so passionate about this, because that gives me a sense that we have a common goal that we can hopefully come together around. And again, thank you, Kathy, for taking on such a difficult task, for leading us in a very, very difficult time. This is not easy for any of us. Many of us have friends, colleagues, family on multiple sides of this debate and in multiple lands where real harm has been done. And I don't want to devalue or diminish any of that. So I understand the depth of importance that this can have for all of us, but we are a community. And I do think that we can we can find a way forward. It may not be clear yet how to do that, but we're here, I think, as Kathy has said, to listen and to try to make those first steps. I'll hand it back to Kathy and Mike and everyone.
No, thanks, Jose. You know, I don't have any graceful and thoughtful last comments drafted. I want to thank everybody for being here. You're here because you care about this issue. And you know, somebody put in a text. I'm sorry, I can't go through all of them. I'm sort of out of my mind right now. I will respond to everybody who emailed me. I will send a personal email message back. I'm open for phone calls too, but I just mean to say, we do take this seriously. We do look forward to having direct conversations with the JE editorial board. I do want to thank the staff, the ACSA staff. They've been muscling through a lot. I want to point out Mike Monty, who's been a champion here, trying to move us forward and to support everything that's happened over the last 2 weeks. I want to thank our ACSA board. I know they're here. We're all uncomfortable because we were all conflicted. None of this is an intended or desired outcome, and we are not dug in, and we do want to find a space for conversation, and we will be responding. I also want to thank Liz and Josh who are available to support us through this difficult conversation, and who's been shepherding us through our strategic planning process. We're grateful to have this community. There are times where it's going to go through some trials, and this is one of them. And to all who I know are here, not for any reason, but because this was shocking and hurtful. Again, I want to apologize personally. We can do better. I can do better. We can keep trying. So that's all I can offer at this point. But we'll keep people updated on how our conversations continue and how we can try to restore some of the relationship between all of us. Thank you.